It was the concept of progressive realism in the approach to security. Is it okay now? This way?
That way.
This way. Okay. Okay.
Could you stand up? It's hard for those to the back to see you.
My dear brothers and sisters, I want to begin with a note that's very positive. I received just a little while ago a text message that the summit of the Nobel Peace Laureates in Merida, Mexico will devote a half an hour of an affirmation of unity with the youth strike.
Yeah.
While I was driving here this morning, I was reflecting on how beautiful what I was seeing is. And I was reflecting that if I was angry, I would not have seen that beauty. And that the extent of the beauty that I was able to see was only the same as the extent of the beauty within myself. If you go to the top of the mountain while you're angry, you will not see the beauty. But when your heart is open with love, you will see the beauty and you will be awed. Now, who are we in this community of caring people, and how do we see things? We see things with realism. We realize that we cannot continue to burn fossil fuel and survive as human beings. But why do we see this? We see it this way because we have hearts that reflect the reality of the oneness of the planet Earth. We are the people with hearts without borders. Because the planet Earth has no borders. And we see that because inside we have that natural insight. This is the first moment in human history where the spiritual admonition of the wise to see the human family as one coincides with the practical and moral imperative to see the human family as one. Now, imagine if you were to run a community or a family or your own life without the application of the moral principle that brings stability within yourself, within your family, and within your community. It's called the Golden Rule. The United States is ultimately based on this premise because it's a principle of equity that all are equal under the law and under reality, or within reality. When this principle is violated in our personal lives, we feel horrible. When it's applied, our hearts and spirits are uplifted. When it's applied amongst nations, stability is the consequence. Think of the reparations that were burdened on the Germans after World War I. The consequence was the chaos of Nazism. And think of the generosity and wisdom of the Marshall Plan. Trading partners and stability. That is the wisdom of the Sustainable Development Goals, which is a realistic approach to security. It is also scientifically realistic. You can measure the health of the oceans, you can measure the climate, you can measure the elimination of poverty, you can measure the health of the rainforests, but you cannot measure strategic stability, which is the doctrine of the nuclear arsenals. You cannot measure military advantage. It didn't apply in Vietnam or Afghanistan. These are immeasurable. I would say that these are dramatic, mythical projections not grounded either in science or morality. And we are the realists because there is a moral message in our lives. There is an ethical message in our humanity. And we see it because our hearts are open. Now we have to approach these issues holistically because they are integrated. If you went to a physician 30 years ago with a stomach ache, he'd probably just give you something to deal with the stomach ache. He may not even ask you, what did you eat? How did you sleep? What do you do? Today, any decent doctor looks at you holistically. I would say that security is a holistic matter, and that the issues that existentially threaten us are inextricably integrated. How will we have the cooperation needed to address the challenge of our oceans and our climate while we are brandishing nuclear weapons, on high trigger alert, spending trillions of dollars, which could be used to protect these environmental sacred gifts? That cooperation will not take place while we brandish nuclear weapons on high trigger alert. Imagine the inequity of it. Imagine if the Biological Weapons Convention said, no country can use smallpox or polio as a weapon, but we'll let 9 countries use the plague as a weapon to pursue international peace security. We would say that's absurd. Why is it absurd? Because it is impractical, because it violates the moral nature of the human being, and it is thus unstable. So progressive realism is both rooted in science, and it is also rooted in the moral nature of being human. We cannot, at the same time, pursue truth without pursuing the good. We have to pursue both. And the truth can be found in science, the truth of the world, and the good can be found within ourselves. We should not shy away from advocating from our spiritual grounding. I was thinking today when there was a talk about the history of religious texts, that if you burned a Bible, a Quran, or a Bhagavad Gita, shame on doing that. But you know, since Gutenberg, you can reprint them. But when you destroy a species, a platypus, or some other strange species that we would never invent, you cannot recreate it. And the war on nature is destroying species. So I say, stop burning our Bible. The planet Earth is our Bible. It is written directly by a sacred hand that is mysterious and loving and good, and it has blessed us with the gift of space and time to learn from one another and to learn from the beauty of this sacred creation. And it is being burned. And we should not shy away from the moral condemnation of this shameful pursuit of greed. It is, in terms of theology, sin. It is wrong. And we know the difference between right and wrong. And we have to apply it. The next thing is, in the commercial world, the smoothness of the trade that's taken place in globalization, the smoothness of the flow of capital, under the rule of law, is extraordinary what's been accomplished since the end of the Cold War. But in terms of security, the treaties are being broken. In terms of the environment, we're operating on an ad hoc basis. Imagine if the business world operated with the same ad hoc attitude that we're relating to the environment and nuclear security. Now, we know the practical solutions to these issues, but what is preventing us from succeeding, I believe, is that we have not approached it with what I call progressive realism, which is 1, morally based, and 2, holistic in approach. Presently, people who care about human rights and human dignity are in one silo. People who care about the survival of the planet without the threat of nuclear annihilation, which hovers over us every day, weapons still on high trigger alert as if the height of the Cold War existed. But now we have a new doctrine that the Joint Chiefs have recently come out with of integrating nuclear weapons in conventional warfighting. And we have a president who refuses even to acknowledge that a nuclear war can never be won and therefore must never be fought. This is a critical moment in this issue, and we're in collective denial over it. And the third issue, which is integrated with the pursuit of security, is the destruction of the climate, and all of the attendant and associated events of that. Biodiversity, let's not call it biodiversity, let's call it killing the sacred creations that have been born with us. So these issues are holistically and realistically before us. So we should be, my operational suggestion is, we need to have a holistic strategy. In the same way as doctors have decided they have to diagnose holistically and treat holistically, we have to approach security holistically. Security is measurable, but we're all divided. The disarmament community is here, the human rights community is here, the climate community is here, and we're natural allies. Now in 1970, Lewis Powell, a lawyer in Phoenix, Arizona, was tasked by the American Chamber of Commerce to address the rejection of capitalism by the elite youth of the United States. Remember, in that year, almost all the major universities went on strike. And it was very effective. And he came up with a strategy calling on the wealthy and powerful to step forward. And they did. The Coors family, the Weyerhaeusers, the Scaife, the Koch brothers. And they funded think tanks abundantly, powerfully, with the hundreds of millions of dollars. Hundreds of millions of dollars they stepped up. And the most important thing they did is they came up with a strategy. Their strategy had 3 goals. 1, less taxes, less government regulation, more money for the military. And they then came out with tactics to achieve that strategy. One of the tactics was to use socially divisive issues to get the votes that would bring their people into power. The socially divisive issues were homosexuality and abortion. So you know that people who are radically against abortion, which is a morally compromised activity, nobody thinks it's a great thing to do. But why would people be against abortion before weaponizing space? Less money for schools, more money for prisons. Why would these same people be not willing to pay any more taxes, but very happy to send their sons and daughters off to war? These are not connected issues. But the issue of global security, cooperation amongst nations to address threats that threaten all of us, those are integrated issues. Those of us who care about the climate have natural allies in the human rights community. It is a violation of human rights to destroy the health of the biosystem. It is a violation of human rights to deprive people of decent water. It is a violation of human rights to destroy the climate. It is a violation of our security. So we have natural allies. So I would urge, I mean, it is fabulous that Chip brings us together and Sally brings us together. This is a fest it's a feast. It's a feast of wisdom and inspiration. But it's not time for strategy here. But I would urge that some funder here, would put up some money and create some strategy groups to find ways of integrating these natural alliances to redefine security. And I want to end, I'll just end with a poem. Because here comes the timer. And this is my plea for the holistic approach. The heart without the hand withers. If you have the calling to act and you don't act, and your heart calls out of loving kindness and compassion to save your fellow human beings, other species in the planet, and you don't act, your heart will wither. Cynicism will be the result, and you will not be well, you will not be healthy, the flow of goodness will not flow through you. But if you act with the hand without the heart, your actions will be very dangerous. If you act without that wisdom of virtue within your heart, without patience, without forethought, without love, without compassion. But when the heart and the hand come together, and by the heart I mean that heart that understands, the knowing heart, not just the passion heart, but the knowing heart, the inner heart, the heart of purity. When the two come together, then the salt of alienation, suffering, fear, loneliness, old age, sickness, and death, the salt of betrayal, the salt of disappointment, is changed into the sugar and sweetness of a life of meaning, of giving, of love, of presence, of beauty. And in that, then when you drive through the mountains, or you drive anywhere, and you look at the wonder of the gift of creation, because your heart has beauty in it, it allows that beauty to grow within you. Amazing. You see the beauty outside. When you're hungry and you drive through New York City, it's full of pizza parlors. When you're hungry for love and compassion, and you're with your fellow human beings, you see their beauty. And when you see their beauty, you step forward and say, I have to act to protect them because they're part of me. Thank you, thank you, thank you.